Hey y'all, welcome to day 8 with Hesperie. This time going to be working on trimming her back hooves. On the previous day, I was able to get her front hooves trimmed and she was a very good sport for all of it. This was going to be her first time having a hoof pick used on her back hooves. Before I started filming, I just did some work on picking up all her feet and making sure she was super comfortable with that. I also picked out her front feet and checked them all over to make sure that they were as balanced as I could get them. I'm going to have her worked on by a professional later, but as she is still wild, I'm able to do a basic trim as I've learned how to trim barefoot hooves. This would help her out to feel more comfortable. I wanted to focus on helping her to feel comfortable and not in any pain before I could do any training. She also, of course, needs to put on some weight, and so that is going to delay things a little bit. But that's okay because I want her feeling her best before I try to teach her new things. This is faster than I would typically ever start trimming a horse's hooves, and I usually do a lot more preparation in advance, but because SB is needing this trim so badly, I needed to move things along, and she did very well. I didn't feel like I was rushing her at all. I felt like she was totally ready for each next step. You can see she's pretty relaxed. I'm trying out doing a little more speeding up in between clips instead of jump cuts, so let me know if y'all like that better. So I'm just being careful because I don't want to squat underneath her and put her hoof in my lap just yet. I wanted to make sure she was ready first. She had a lot of outside flare, so I just clipped a little bit off so she could get used to the sound of the nippers. And I'm going to speed some things up so that I don't have to make quite as many jump cuts, but you can still see everything that happened without it taking too long. I started to rest her hoof on my knee and tried to find a comfortable spot for her. It's hard because I don't want to be fully underneath her the way a farrier will go underneath a more tame horse, but I want her hoof in a comfortable position where it's not being stretched out to the side. So I'm trying to find that balance where SB is happy to hold her hoof up for me. She's doing very good. I never would have thought that I'd be trimming a horse so early into their training with minimal hoof handling, always taking some time to inspect the hooves and make sure that I'm trying to help the balance out. I think it's super important to make sure a horse has these skills, not necessarily standing for a trim if they don't need a trim so early on, but comfortable with you all around them, handling their hooves, standing behind them even. That's a step that is going to take SB a little bit longer, but messing with their tail and everything, I think it's important to have those things in place before you start to do under saddle training. Just repositioned her where she could find a more comfortable and balanced spot to stand.
She was probably going to take it from me anyway. So it's fun when the realization sets in. There's a wild animal's hoof 2 inches from my face.
I also wanted to show the camera a little bit more of her hoof.
This is her good leg though.
You can see all that crusted mud on her leg. On the next day, I was going to bathe her and try to get all that off. I don't mind if she has to rebalance herself. It's hard to learn how to stand on 3 legs. So here you can see, I think I had her leg a little bit too far out to the side. She was being pretty good, but if I were a little braver, I might have been able to hold her leg in a bit more comfortable of a position for her. You can see how much extra sole she had, and her hoof wall is very thick. Mustangs are pretty good at growing good strong feet, and when they're not in the wild to wear them down, they can get overgrown pretty quickly. I do have people ask me, what do they do about their hooves and their teeth and everything out in the wild? Well, they wear down naturally, but sometimes they don't wear down evenly, which is why it's important to get their hooves done and their teeth checked by a dentist when you get them. As for the holding pins, they're not able to float their teeth in the holding pins, but they are sometimes able to trim them. However, the schedule they get trimmed on is going to vary, and because of the difficulty of trimming a horse in a squeeze chute, they might not always end up with the most balanced of hooves. But they do their best to keep up on their hooves. I'm kind of struggling with how thick the hoof wall is here. I'm carving out sole at the same time. I didn't have a hoof knife on me, but the nippers had the same effect. If I didn't take any sole off, she would be having way too much sole pressure. She had a lot of pressure on her soles, which I think was also an issue with the front hooves and possibly contributing to her soreness. Checking her balance and giving her a rest because she was being very good. Just nipping off a little bit of that toe.
Down with this foot. Oh, girl.
She was being very good, but every horse has a bit of a patience timer, and sometimes they just lose their balance. So I adjusted her position to where I could find where she might be a little more comfortable standing, and tried to make the finishing touches. It wasn't going to be perfect on day one, and I didn't have a rasp or anything, but I could try to make it better than it was before. There was still just a bit too much outside heel, so I tried to even that out for her. Then it was time to work on her right hind. This one, if you remember from previous videos, she's a bit more sensitive about picking up that hoof. I think that the mud on her leg was making her skin sensitive. So I just took my time preparing her. You can see the concern on her face. She was a little bit more worried about holding up this hoof for me.
I've never looked at a horse and been like, this is way too much sole. Why do you have so much? This is the one that hurts her.
Like I said in the previous video, I think it's really interesting how the horses change when I feel like I'm doing something that's just to help them out. I'm trying to help her feel more comfortable and trying to get something done that I typically would ideally like to wait until later in the training so that it's safer for me and more likely to be a good experience for the horse having their hooves trimmed for the first time. But because I needed to get this done so soon, I was still trying to take my time, not trying to rush her, but she allowed me to do way more than I expected her to. I was trying to listen to her and see what she would let me do, and she let me get a lot done. Once again, I think I was holding her leg a little bit far out to the side. That's why it's really helpful for me to watch back these videos, because I learn a lot of things from watching it in the third person. I can see little mistakes that I made and things that might have helped the horse learn a bit faster if I'd noticed in the moment. I let her take her hoof back if she needed to rebalance herself and adjusted her position so that the camera could see. I was holding my elbow on her heel to give the hoof more of a feeling like it's being held there rather than just resting on my leg, because she might be more likely to take her hoof back and not realize she's supposed to leave it. And so that made my job trimming a little bit harder. I was struggling to get through all of that hoof wall. She was a bit flinchy there, but then she let me pick up her hoof. I decided to reposition her so that she would be in a more balanced spot and it would be easier for the camera to see what I was doing. She flinched again. I think I startled her, and then she was willing to let me pick up her hoof. Gave her and myself a second to rest and picked her hoof back up again. I was trying to see where she would be comfortable holding it, and from watching the video, I needed to stand a little more underneath her, even though it is nerve-wracking to do with a wild Mustang. I was holding her leg too far out to the side, which was probably not the most comfortable position for her. So she probably would have had an easier time holding her hoof up if I'd been just a little more underneath her. So that was an understandable reaction for her. I don't get too worried if she takes her hoof away. I just pick it back up and go right back to work. This isn't exactly textbook trimming form anyway, because I'm trying to protect myself in case she gets unsure, make sure I can get out of the way quickly. Well, that was all I needed to do on that day. Thank y'all so much for watching. She made a lot of improvement in the balance of her back hooves, and I was really excited to see her start to feel better.